Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell to keep up to date with the latest installments.
Tim and Woodsy were in Patricia's lab already when the technicians began unpacking the finds. By this stage, word had got around that the shuttle team had found something, and that something was top secret. Naturally, due to the sensitive nature of this information, many people already knew about it, and others perpetuated rumours which were actually nowhere near as wild as the truth.
"Mr. Wood," Douglas greeted. "I didn't remember inviting you to be part of this project."
I stuttered Woodsy. Tim butted in before anyone else could speak.
"I didn't tell anyone, Captain, honestly,"
he said, full of concern. Douglas put a hand on the young man's shoulder.
"I didn't think for 1 minute that you had, Mr. Norris. You see, on board a ship, any ship, when the crew is ordered to absolute secrecy, everyone usually knows all about it by the time the captain's finished ordering everyone to absolute secrecy."
"Can I ask what you found, Captain?"
ventured Tim cautiously.
"Aye, I'll let your friend Natalie explain. I see you've been looking after her dog."
Douglas bent down to tousle the animal's ears.
"Yes,"
Tim replied ruefully.
"Mum's already told me off for bringing him into the lab, but I reckon he's as curious as I am."
Reaver, his fur neatly brushed, sat dutifully to attention, paw raised in proper greeting. He remained completely motionless apart from the propeller at his rear, which smacked the deck like a grounded outboard. The captain smiled, shaking the proffered limb.
"Very smartly turned out, laddie. Very smart indeed."
Tim frowned. He and Woodsy could remain on sufferance, compliments all the way for the dog. He could have sworn Reaver looked smug as he glanced up with a "Tuff." Tim was beginning to understand that this soft bark, depending on the situation, was the collie's way of saying either, "Look at me, I'm awesome, see me being good," or, "Oi, I want something." Such a tiny vocabulary, and yet dogs had managed over millennia to train the human race to do almost everything for them. The young man's musings on just what "it's a dog's life" actually entailed were interrupted as his mother and her team gathered around for Dr. Natalie Pearson's briefing. The group were rapt by the dig's findings so far, and Natalie's short disclosure was greeted by a protracted silence while everyone grappled with this latest twist.
"There's little doubt as to the age of your finds, then?"
asked Patricia.
"The shuttle scans give a reasonable ballpark,"
replied Natalie.
"I'll send one of the core samples we cut from the rock and a bone fragment down to Dr. Portree. She has some fairly heavy-duty radiocarbon dating equipment amongst her mining gear."
"Dr. Pearson, how long do you expect it to take before we get results back?" asked Douglas.
"An in-depth study will take weeks, but we should be able to put the highlights together this evening, Captain. It may give us a bit more direction for tomorrow's dig."
"Very good, doctors. I'll leave it with you."
Douglas tossed them a casual salute and left the scientists to their intellectual frenzy. Sitting alone in his quarters later that evening, Douglas mulled over a long and very eventful day. The peace and solitude soon became soporific, and he began to nod.
"Time to turn in for the night, I think," he yawned.
Barely had the words left his lips when the door chimed. He sighed.
"So much for that,"
he muttered, walking to the door and activating the small screen built into the locking control panel. No one could afford to be complacent these days. The screen lit up to show Dr. Pearson waiting patiently in the corridor. Douglas pressed open and smiled in greeting.
"Natalie, come in, please."
She looked tired but determined.
"Hello, Captain. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but I thought you might want to know what we found. I didn't want to spring it on you tomorrow. I'm sure you'll have some thinking to do."
Douglas frowned slightly.
"That sounds ominous. Please have a seat, Doctor."
He offered his guest a drink, pouring them both a wee dram as a nightcap. Natalie accepted the tumbler gratefully.
"Thank you."
"So, what is it you found?" he asked.
"Something that's almost beyond belief, Captain, to be honest," she said. "I mean, even more than usual around here."
Go on, he encouraged.
The radiocarbon dating analysis came back, and the initial prediction of about 20 million years old seems to have been borne out. However, what's even more extraordinary is that Patricia Norris thinks she's identified the man.
Douglas stared for a moment. Come again?
I know, Pearson sighed exhaustedly. You may want to top your glass up before you hear the rest, Captain.
Douglas thought it would be remiss to disobey Doctor's orders. He topped the zoologist's glass up too. She looked like she needed it.
Thanks. As we saved nearly 3/4 of the teeth in the skull, said Pearson, taking a Scotch Livener, Patricia came up with the idea of cross-checking them with Mars mission personnel records in the ship's computer, which sounded crazy at first, but then digging up the fossilized bones of a man who died 120 million years before man isn't what you'd call normal. So we thought, why not?
And what did you find?
Asked Douglas, unsure whether he wanted to know. I'm sorry to break this to you, Captain, but the man we found was a friend of yours.
Natalie paused, perceiving that Douglas was either unwilling to ask or was perhaps incapable of asking who it was. She regretfully let the hammer fall.
Forgive me, but we're fairly sure that the bones we found were the fossilized remains of Captain Bessel.
The news hit Douglas like a gut punch. Arnold Bessel, he managed eventually. She nodded sympathetically.
I'm so sorry, Captain.
You're sure? There's no doubt? Asked Douglas, unwilling to believe.
As sure as we can be, she shrugged apologetically. It's not just the dental records. We shaved off sections of bone. It's mostly fossilized, but there are still some traces of DNA in the shards. It's on the limits of our technology given the age, but we ran it past Dr. Wright, who cross-referenced the DNA samples once again with Mars mission personnel records. He said there was a close match with the DNA sample we have on record for Captain Bessel, close enough to be familial. Add the fact that Captain Bessel had no family working within the Mars mission or NASA to the dental records, and it seems fairly conclusive.
She took a breath to continue, but faltered, looking uncomfortable. There's more? Asked Douglas, picking up on her reticence.
Possibly, Captain, she admitted. You must understand, though, this is more conjectural than the evidence we have for Captain Bessel.
Go on, Doctor, Douglas prompted stoically.
We've analysed the scans of the other body. Fortunately, they were both pretty well preserved, and we seem to have another semi-complete dentition. Obviously, we haven't excavated the second skeleton yet, but from the initial scans, and the resolution on that scanning equipment is superb, we think we have another match. Lieutenant Audrey Jansen.
Audrey, Douglas repeated morosely. She was Arnold's pilot. They were both friends of mine. Fine officers.
Yes, Captain, I'm sorry. The fact that the two sets of remains were so closely connected also adds to the likelihood of the match, I'm afraid.
Of course. Thank you, Doctor. You've done a remarkable job.
He sighed and took another drink.
I'd better tell Lieutenant Lloyd about this too.
Really? Asked Pearson, too surprised to be courteous. Sorry, Captain, I didn't mean to pry.
Douglas smiled sadly. No need for apology, Natalie. Lloyd and Audrey had a thing going some years back. He mentioned her during our little chat the other night.
Is he still holding a candle for her?
One in each hand. He'd never admit to that outwardly, of course, but I think I should let him know. It's the least I can do. He frowned in thought. Do we have any idea how they came to be here?
Pearson raised a wry eyebrow. That might take a little longer to work out. The only theory we have so far is for some kind of rescue mission mounted after we disappeared. She shrugged. It could have taken them months to figure out what happened to us. If they managed to find a way to replicate the effects of the disaster, presumably without blowing a massive hole in the side of their ship, and follow a wormhole back here.
She tailed off, considering the possibility.
All I can say is, if that's what they did, it was incredibly brave, Captain. They could have ended up anywhere or any when.
So, they left after we did, And arrived 20 million years before us? Asked Douglas in disbelief.
It's just a theory, she shrugged again. They and their ship, the USS Newfoundland, were all safe on Earth when we departed. We left first and they arrived first. I've no idea how the hare and tortoise figure in this story.
Her expression became uncomfortable once more.
The thing is, Captain, they must have been fully kitted out for a rescue mission. You see, unlike us, they knew where and when they were going. More or less.
That makes sense, agreed Douglas. What's your point?
Simply that they arrived 20 million years ago and clearly never left. Now you can bet NASA called in the top minds in the world to prepare them for this period, she stated. However, despite almost certainly being as prepared as anyone could possibly be, they, she faltered.
Died? Asked Douglas.
Natalie nodded awkwardly.
So what chance do we have of surviving? Is that what you're saying? He asked again, sagging slightly. Poor Arnold. Poor all of them. But what courage, Natalie. What courage to have done that.
His voice was hoarse with admiration.
I've known Arnold Bessel most of my life. Since we were children. His father was American Air Force, based in Scotland for a few years. We stayed in touch from then on. His influence helped me get this post, in fact.
He put his head in his hands and sighed deeply. I'm sorry, Captain.
Natalie stood, placing a hand on Douglas's shoulder.
I'd better leave you. I'll see you in the morning.
Douglas got to his feet wearily. Thank you, Natalie. I'll see you in the shuttle bay at 0800, and well done, he added seriously. I may not like your findings, but that's outstanding work.
Thank you, Captain. I am sorry, she repeated gently. However, just before I go, there's one piece of news which is a little more hopeful, perhaps.
Oh? Asked Douglas, lifting slightly.
Yes, Dr. Satnam Patel was with us when we made these discoveries. He said it gave him some new ideas about how to think about our problem. If they managed to deliberately manipulate a wormhole to travel back here, then he just might have the beginnings of an idea to take us home. Although he did say that theoretically, time travel is easier backwards because of the maximum speed of photons and, well, perhaps it would be best if Satnam explained it.
Aye, replied Douglas, chuckling softly, but I doubt it would help.
It was a milestone day for the teenagers. Gathered in the embarkation lounge, they positively chomped at the bit, because today, Tim, Woodsy, Henry and Rose were going outside. All were 16 or over, and under the new ruling, they had reached their majority, and subsequently, the decision was theirs. All except Clarissa, who was not happy. Henry tried to placate his younger sister. It seemed that Bernstein Sr. had chosen today to become a concerned parent, refusing her permission to go out with the others. He had tried to stop Henry too, but Henry had decided that, on this new world, he would make his own decisions. He was 18, and older than the others anyhow, so not going out with them would have shamed him. "I'm sorry, Clary, I'd take you if I could," he explained gently.
"Can't I go and just not tell Dad?"
she asked plaintively. He smiled patiently. "You know we can't do that. Without authorization from a parent or guardian, you can't go outside. I'm real sorry, Clary, but it's only for now. You'll be able to go out soon. We'll all have to go out soon."
"But today's the first time, and Timmy's going too."
She fought back tears of frustration. Henry attempted a hug, but she pulled away.
"You could try and talk Ma around,"
she asked, giving it one last try. "Ma will just do whatever he says," said Henry, trying to keep the bitterness out of his voice. "You know that."
"Try Pa again, then."
He looked down at her sadly. "When I tried, it just made him worse. You know he was still spitting nails about that chewing out Commander Baines gave him about the Germans. Look, I promise I'll take you out with me as soon as I can, okay? Huh?" Clarissa slumped and turned away. Henry pulled at Tim's sleeve. "Try and cheer her up a bit before we go, will you?" Tim nodded and caught up with Clary as she set off on her slow walk. Rose and Woodsy were laughing about something, so Henry went to investigate.
"Hey, what's with you two?" he asked.
Rose gave Woodsy a shove.
"It will get big again."
Henry raised an eyebrow, wondering what on earth the New Zealander had told her this time. Rosie looked to him.
"Tell him, Henry."
"Tell him what?"
he asked, mystified.
"I've told her about the effects of wearing a Kevlar helmet, mate,"
Woodsy admitted, grinning broadly.
"The long-term effects, that is."
"And what would those be?" asked Henry.
Kevlar chemically bonds with human hair at the molecular level, causing permanent flattening,
Woodsy explained sagely.
"They use it as a cure for people with frizzy hair."
Henry immediately saw where this was going, so he adopted a serious expression.
"Yeah, I'd heard that," he agreed.
"Apparently it's irreversible, too." He looked at Rose's voluminous blonde locks, shaking his head and sucking his teeth with concern.
"I doubt you'll ever get it back like that again,"
he postulated sadly.
"No,"
squeaked Rose, putting a hand to her hair.
"Surely my lifting gel will get it back,"
she asked, really worried now.
"Well, you might get away with it the first time,"
replied Henry.
"but the effects are cumulative, or so I've heard."
Woodsy was nodding vigorously, loving it.
"Yeah, that's right. More than once, though, and you'll have to join the Flathead Society," he added for good measure.
Rose squeaked again in alarm, which fortuitously covered the snort of laughter which burst out of Henry before he could get himself back under control.
"By the way,"
asked Woodsy, frowning slightly with interest,
"how much hair product do you have? And what are you going to do after it's gone?"
Rose blanched.
"I've got to go,"
she said.
"What? Why?"
asked Henry, troubled by this new direction his carefully planned morning had just taken.
"Because if Mum realises that our hair and makeup products will come to an end, she'll hide them all."
Woodsy and Henry burst out laughing.
"What are you going to do?"
asked Henry.
"Divvy them up and stash your half?"
"No,"
Rose retorted.
"I'm going to steal most of it and hide it."
The boys laughed again.
"Surely that can wait,"
asked Woodsy.
"We are about to step outside onto prehistoric Earth."
Rose shook her head.
"No, it can't. If Lara gets there first, I won't see any of it."
"Well, she hasn't tried to hide it so far, has she?"
asked Henry, trying to placate her.
"That's because no one's told her it's going to run out,"
snapped Rose.
"Surely she's worked that out already,"
asked Woodsy in disbelief.
"Have you met Mrs. Miller?"
Henry gave him a secret look. Woodsy nodded, looking thoughtful.
"When I realised she was Rose's mum, I tried to say hello once."
"Tried to? What happened?"
asked Rose.
"I was almost knocked out by her personal armada of remote selfie cameras, buzzing about to catch her best sides," he shrugged. "Still, I'm sure you'll be all right. The dinosaurs were known for having great hair. No, wait."
Henry was grinning, but Rose was becoming more annoyed, an annoyance sure to make its way his way shortly. He held his hands up, trying not to laugh, and reached a gentle arm around her shoulder.
"Don't sweat it. With or without makeup or any other products, you'll always be crazy hot."
He smiled his most ingratiating smile. Rose didn't return it. Instead, she replied,
"If all the beauty products run out, I'm going to look haggard, like I'm about 25 or something."
She waited to be corrected, a vain hope which turned into a vain hope.
"I'm sure it'll be fine, honey. It's only for an hour or so,"
Henry tried, inexperience causing him to completely miss his cue.
"Yeah,"
Woodsy chipped in, all concern.
"So you say. But what if she gets back and old Mother Hubbard has already raided the cupboard?"
"Not helping," replied Henry, in a sing-song voice through a tight smile.
"I've got to go."
Rose pulled away, adamantly this time.
"I don't want to join the fatheads. It's not worth it."
"Flatheads,"
Woodsy called after her.
"I said flatheads."
"Will you pipe down?"
Henry complained, getting wound up by both sides.
"Let me go."
The ghost of old Rose flashed, possessing the body of the new. By the time Tim returned, All three were shouting at one another. Whilst he tried to find out what in the world they were bickering about, they were drowned out by the roar of the shuttle's engines opening up as the dig team made their way back to Fossil Rock. The teenagers ran as one to a porthole, watching them go.
"Great!" Tim cried excitedly. "Commander Baines said we could go and get ourselves kitted up in the security office once the dig team were away. Let's go!" "Do we have to wear helmets?" asked Rose. "Of course! You don't want one of those carnivorous pterosaurs to scalp you, do you?" asked Tim reasonably. Rose touched her hair again, anxious, yet undecided.
"It's not true about Kevlar, Rose," said Henry kindly. "Woodsy was just making it up." He turned to his friend, demanding a lifeline out of the hole he had dug for himself. "Well, tell her." Woodsy gave Rose a look of absolute sincerity.
"The Kevlar thing's all gospel, mate,"
he vouched unhelpfully.
"See? I told you!"
Rose shouted at Henry.
"He's lying."
"Not me, mate."
"You just don't care about what happens to me." "I don't care?"
"She's right, mate. If my girl's hair was going to fall out..."
"Save it, will you? Even your friend cares more about me than you do." "Does he?"
"Well, I wouldn't tell any Sheila to keep her hair on, but..."
"Will you shut your damn mouth?"
"Don't tell him to shut up. This is all your fault."
"Well, there's no need to give the bloke a hard time. Maybe you could use an umbrella or something?"
"Save it." "Shut up."
Tim was halfway across the large chamber when Rose called,
"Where are you going, Tim?" "I thought I'd better get suited up and have a walk outside," he called over his shoulder. "Maybe even climb up to the new walkway along the palisade and see the amazing views over the plains, forests and mountains. Perhaps study the incredible prehistoric animals out there. You never know. This miraculous chance to see what no human being has ever seen before might be worth a look. But don't let me interrupt you. Bye."
The suddenly muted trio looked from one to another before shouting in unison, "Wait for me!" Major White was already in the security office, checking everyone's equipment personally. He wasn't happy that the first group of sightseers were all kids and would accompany them first time out. His small squad of armed security personnel were also preparing for their walk outside. When White expressed his concerns to Commander Baines, she had told him that they all had to go out sooner or later, and that if they did get into trouble, at least teenagers would be better able to make a run for it. White had misgivings, but despite them, he greeted the young men and women warmly as they entered.
"Hey, kids. Looking forward to your first walkout?"
"Yes, sir,"
said Tim, his face alight with excitement.
"That is, as long as these three squabblers cut it out."
He pointed at his friends with a thumb over the shoulder.
"Hey, I was just an innocent squabblee, mate,"
muttered Woodsy. "Are you kidding? You started it all," Henry snapped back, scandalized.
"It was you who told me the effects of Kevlar were Cumberland,"
Rose chipped in, still seething. "Cumulative," Henry remarked. "I said they were cumulative."
"Don't correct me."
"I didn't."
"You did."
"Yeah, I know how she feels, mate."
The security officers watched with mild amusement until White shouted,
"Enough!"
Tim was already getting into a Kevlar suit as the Major continued.
"Out there is a dangerous place. Very dangerous. So we'll have no messing around, okay?"
"Yes, sir," said three rather quieter voices. White blew out his cheeks to calm himself.
"Right. Now put these on,"
he said, shaking his head.
"Major White, can I ask you about the helmets?"
asked Rose. Woodsy snorted, and Henry looked away to hide his smirk. White looked levelly at her.
"Well?"
he asked eventually.
"Will it flatten my hair?"
White rubbed a hand down his face slowly, to buy some time while he waited for patience to arrive.
"Probably,"
he admitted wearily.
"Eek! I can't go then."
White was at a loss. He opened his mouth to speak, but Tim placed a gentle hand on his arm.
"Major, may I say something, please?"
The Major, stuck between bafflement and impatience, gave him the floor.
"Knock yourself out, kid."
"Rose,"
Tim began.
"Kevlar will not chemically bond with your hair, nor will it give you a flat head. Check with your dad if you don't believe me. These two were just winding you up. In fact, don't believe anything Woodsy ever tells you and you'll be just fine, okay? Now, can we go outside, please?
The outer airlock opened and 5 soldiers stepped outside. After checking the immediate vicinity for threats, White gave the all clear and the 4 youths followed them, looking rather like a hockey team without the sticks. The outer palisade was now complete and stood 5 meters high atop the earthwork ramparts, making the whole construct around 10 meters tall. The front of the earthwork was shored up and held back with further tree trunks, raked at such an angle as to make it much too steep for a large animal to climb, but still with enough lean to create a batter, countering the thrust of the retained embankment and preventing slippage. The tree trunks were tall enough to give the builders plenty of options with regards to cutting and dressing. The 5-meter timber walls both extended another 2 meters underground, deeper in some places. The workmen used trenches dug by the smaller machinery to situate the trunks. Heavier plant then drove them still further into the earth before backfilling. From outside the enclosure, the whole structure appeared as a massive ditch with a slightly sloping timber wall behind it and another vertical timber wall on top of that. The primitive walls were a monument to human ingenuity. Indeed, in a very real sense, they were the monument, the solid archetype and very first unnatural thing ever actually constructed upon the earth. The lower wall held back thousands of tons of soil and stones, which was ramped neatly at the rear and stitched with a crisscross of small roads and access ways. The construction team had even completed some of the high walk which, although built primarily for security, would soon allow people to stroll along the walls for a breathtaking view of their new world. With the massive gates now in place, the compound was locked down and safe, at least from any land-based incursion. Secured by 2 drawbars, made from tree trunks stripped of their bark, the gates could not be opened quickly, but at 8 meters tall, they were immensely strong. Regardless of their tall as necessary, small as possible design, they could only be opened by machine, each brace weighing a couple of tons in its own right. The gaggle of teenagers ambled across the enclosure, unsure where to investigate first. However, aside from the weirdness of a pseudo-Iron Age rampart and palisade snuggled up against the belly of a vast spaceship, they all kept at least one eye on the skies. The story of Dr. Flanagan's brush with vicious flying reptiles had spread through the crew like a celebrity liaison on social media, complete with biting commentary and obligatory clawing. In fact, many of the passengers were deeply afraid to leave the ship, in some cases expressing a desire never to do so. Tim didn't feel that way. Indeed, he suspected that part of the reason they had been permitted to take this little stroll outside was because their leaders saw this growing fear of leaving the ship as a problem in the making. By allowing a bunch of kids to go outside, albeit with an armed escort, they were trying to illustrate that it was in fact child's play. For Tim, it was just about seeing a dinosaur, a real one, in the real world. Not on a screen, not behind glass, real. However, being interested in almost everything does have its drawbacks, being easily distracted chief among them, and his attention was suddenly drawn up towards the team working on the wall walk. They were driving a second, inner row of posts into the top of the rampart, parallel to the main wall. These were spaced at roughly 1200mm intervals and cross-braced to the outer leaf. The cross-bracing timbers were cut for purpose and connected using large, if basic, dovetail joints. This locked-together, outrigger framework provided the main skeleton on which the walkway would sit. In the fathomless, far-flung future, armies of men would work for months or even years to accomplish similar security systems, all with basic tools of wood, bone, stone, and later metal. A few moments more into the future would, of course, see man create machines capable of working 1,000 man-hours in a day. Knowing that no one would build a JCB digger for almost 100 million years, Tim couldn't help but smile as he watched just such a machine push a huge tree trunk into the Cretaceous soil with no obvious sign of effort. He recognized the construction principles as basically Roman, and was sure he had read somewhere that even they may have pinched the idea. It allowed a very solid, very strong structure to be assembled very quickly, and here they were, reusing it before it had even been invented. He would be willing to lay money that the Romans' work was tidier, though. After a moment, his smile turned to a frown. Time.
Hey, Tim, what's up?
Asked Henry, breaking into his thoughts.
Oh, nothing really,
Tim answered, slowly returning from his reverie.
I was just thinking that we've ruined our world back home. We've overconsumed and overbred ourselves to the brink of our own demise, and now we're here. Now we've even broken time, too. I wonder what price we or someone will have to pay for it.
Henry chuckled.
You are one cheerful SOB, do you know that?
Tim laughed.
Hey, someone needs to keep you on the ground, he retorted. You've been floating around with that stupid grin on your face since Rose agreed to put up with you.
Oh, and what about you and my kid sister?
Asked Henry archly.
That's completely different.
Tim backpedaled.
Really?
Henry mocked, hitting Tim on the shoulder.
So you don't think she's hot then, huh?
Of course not,
Tim replied, rubbing his upper arm.
I would say she's sweetly pretty, you crass American.
They laughed together, but reaching the top of the rampart, both fell silent. Awe, for once, without shock.
That is truly momentous,
said Tim.
Awesome,
agreed Henry.
The work crews have done an incredible job putting all this together so quickly,
said Tim.
Even with heavy machinery, this is a lot of work. I know there's still much to do, but even so, fair play.
Yeah, agreed Henry. It was a good idea to keep the permanent fire going out here from the cutting waste. Keeping the animals at arm's length has really moved the work on. I always look when I go past a window. Haven't seen anything monstrous in the clearing for days now. I heard that was your idea, huh?
Well, it was just something I sort of discussed with Natalie a few days ago, Tim replied a little awkwardly. Smoke will normally frighten animals away, you know? But she filled in all the details, really.
You and your English modesty,
chuckled Henry, ruffling the younger boy's hair in a friendly if boisterous manner.
I can see why you've got my kid sister hooked. You're embarrassing me.
Oi!
Tim cried out, batting the bigger lad off as best he could. They both laughed again, before returning to the miracle before their eyes. Such beauty and such peace. The only sounds those of Woodsy and Rose squabbling a little way off.
I hope they let the fires go out soon,
said Tim distantly.
I want my dinosaurs back.
Henry answered without really listening, and they lapsed into a contented silence once more. The moment was only slightly marred by the loud, hollow slap and cry of "Ow!" as Rose carried out a surprise durability test on the New Zealander's Kevlar helmet for him. Henry and Tim ignored them.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah?
Tim replied, barely able to tear his eyes away from the view.
This is all so incredible,
Henry continued mildly.
And things have been going pretty well for days now, haven't they?
They have,
Tim agreed, smiling dreamily now.
It's like we're starting again. All brand new, he added,
gesturing with a sweep of his arm. So, Henry pressed on doggedly, how long do you think it'll be before it all goes to crap again?
Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. New installments uploaded each week. Subscribe for more. Visit the link in the description for free New World companion stories, available for download as ebooks.